الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us recognize the truth and help us follow it, to help us recognize the falsehood and help us avoid it. Jazakumullah khair for coming. One of the topic I think it has to be something in light of some of the events that are happening today. And subhanAllah, one thing that you easily notice is that everything is happening so quickly. That changes are happening so quickly. Sometimes, more quickly than you can actually digest them, so to speak, or keep up with them. And this is something that the Prophet ﷺ foretold us when he said that basically that the tribulations will come like dark pieces of the night. And he says some people will start their day as Muslim, will end it as a disbeliever, and will start their day as a disbeliever and end it as a Muslim. And he says, يُبِيعُ أَحَدَهُمْ دِينَهُ بِعَرَضٍ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا, that some people will sell their deen for some meager gain, some very little gain, worldly gain. So this is something that we see, subhanAllah, happening all the time, with the quick changes that are happening. And of course people will say, well, what's to be done? What is the direction to go? And of course the Prophet ﷺ, by the way, used to start his khutbah by saying, أما بعد فإن خير الكلام كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. The best of the book, the words, is the book of Allah, and the best of the guidance is the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ. So did the Prophet say anything related to that? There's actually a long hadith that talks specifically about the fitan and the tribulations. And the hadith was narrated by Abdullah ibn Amr al-As in Sahih Muslim, and a slightly different version in Tirmidhi and others, where Abdullah ibn Amr al-As said that one day we were returning from an expedition with the Prophet ﷺ, so we stopped somewhere to rest, doing different things. And as we were sitting and resting, then the Prophet ﷺ sent among us somebody declaring as-salatu jami'ah, which is an expression that the Prophet normally used to say whenever he has an important declaration to make. So we rushed, he says, to where the Prophet ﷺ was, and the Prophet ﷺ said that أَمَّا بَعْدْ فَأَنَّهُ مَا بَعَثَ اللَّهُ مِنْ نَبِيٍّ فِي أُمَّةٍ مِنَ الْأُمَمِ, that whenever the Prophet whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends any prophet among any nations, it becomes a must on that prophet to guide them to that which is of benefit to them, and to warn them of that which is harmful to them, which is in a way like an introduction for what is coming next. So the Prophet ﷺ, with that statement, is saying that he has the guidance, he has the directions, he told you, or he will tell you actually what to do. And he says, وَإِنَّ هَذِهِ الْأُمَّةِ جُعِلَتْ عَافِيَتُهَا فِي أَوَّلِهَا, that this ummah, the healthier period of the life of this ummah, is the earlier period. وَسَيُصِيبُ آخِرَهَا بَلَاءٌ وَأَشْيَاءٌ تُنْكِرُونَهَا, and the latter period in the life of this ummah will be afflicted by bala, afflictions and hardships and difficulties from outside, and things within you that are rejectable to you. So he's talking about problems coming from outside and problems coming from within. Bala, something coming from outside, and أشياء تنكرونها, problems happening from within. Deviations, people going astray, people doing crazy things from within the community, people losing it, people accepting the wrong, praising the wrong, changing or twisting their principles, which we see happening probably. Subhanallah, we see happening. And I think first it's really important, I'll go back to the rest of the hadith, but when we're talking about problems like that, it is good to see it with a proper perspective. What do I mean by that? To see it for what it is. The fact that some people actually have gone astray, it doesn't mean this is the way to go. It doesn't mean this is the path to take. Even when we see people, actually great people, dying, people being killed, it doesn't mean we lose hope, we despair. When we see actually even people that we thought were doing something good going the wrong way, it doesn't change anything. Even if somebody actually was teaching the Quran and has done something wrong, it doesn't mean the Quran is bad. It means that person has done something wrong. And we have an example of that from the time of the Prophet ﷺ. There was a person who learned from the Prophet. What could be better than that? His name was Al-Rajjal ibn Unqwa. And then when Musaylama declared himself to be a prophet, then he became one of his followers. What could be one of that? It doesn't mean that the Prophet's teachings or guidance was bad. It means that person actually chose to do the wrong way. That's why, we do not follow individuals, but we follow principles. This is something important to keep in mind. People can go astray. Any of us, by the way. Nobody's guaranteed asma, except the Prophet ﷺ. So none of us is guaranteed to be actually on the straight path. It doesn't mean that what we were doing was wrong. It means that we have gone the wrong way. That's why people's presence can come and go. Even the Prophet ﷺ, when he died, and some people were about to lose it, then Abu Bakr as-Siddiq reminded them, من كان يعبد محمدا فإن محمدا قد مات ومن كان يعبد الله فإن الله حي لا يموت. That whoever was worshipping Muhammad, Muhammad is dead. Whoever was worshipping Allah, Allah is a living that never dies. And he recited the great verse in Ali Imran, وما محمد إلا رسول قد خلت من قبل الرسل أفإن مات أو قتل انقلبتم على أعقابكم ومن ينقلب على عقبيه فلن يضر الله شيئا وسيجزي الله الشاكرين. That Muhammad was only a prophet before whom there were other prophets. So if he dies or gets killed, are you going to turn away? So just why, what we see, for example, this person being killed or this person dying, it doesn't mean it's the end of the message. The message continues beyond every person. But subhanAllah, like we were saying actually in the previous session, that sometimes we have this, we're seeking a savior, so to speak. We think that everything goes back to one person. I mean, how many times have we heard people saying, or even actually us ourselves saying it, we need a new Salah ad-Din. Well, yes, but Salah ad-Din did not come out of nothing. It was a whole generation, multiple generations. He came after an effort that lasted 100 years. That started with Al-Ghazali and then went actually beyond that until at the end it came with Nur ad-Din Zinki, Imad ad-Din Zinki, and then Salah ad-Din. So that's why it is not actually one person. Even if Isa alayhi salam comes back to a destroyed environment, he won't be able to do anything. That's why it is not just one person, but everyone actually has to contribute to something. So anyway, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, وَسَيُصِيبُ آخِرَهَا بَلَاءٌ وَأَشْيَاءٌ تُنْكِرُونَهَا. And despite the problems, I think, like I said, to see it from the proper perspective, that we see, wallahi, great examples of people that have been persevered. Look what's happening in Gaza. This is part of the same landscape, so to speak, part of the same ummah, part of the same pictures. So these people, if anything, should give us a lot of hope and a lot of pride that we belong to the same ummah as these people. So despite all the pressure, that these people remain steadfast and they're persevering. So again, back to the hadith. وَسَيُصِيبُ آخِرَهَا بَلَاءٌ وَأَشْيَاءٌ تُنْكِرُونَهَا. There's an interesting other version of the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, تُقْبِلُ الْفِتَنِ يُرَقِّقُ بَعْضُهَا بَعْضًا حَتَّى يَقُولْ عَبْدْ هَذِهِ مُهْلِكَتِي. He says that the tribulations, the difficulties, come in a succession, one after the other. Each time one of them comes, it makes you forget the previous one. Before October 7th actually started, not long before that, there was a big earthquake in Morocco. About 10,000 people that were killed. When that happened, that's what everybody was thinking about. And then a few days later, the big floods in Libya. 15,000 people were killed. Everybody forgot what happened in Morocco. But it's still going on, And then October 7th started, and everybody forgot what happened actually in Libya and Morocco and elsewhere, even though it's still happening. And now, the same thing, it intensifies in Lebanon and then intensifies in Gaza. You forget what? They come in a succession. That's what the Prophet says. And when they come, he says, حَتَّى يَقُولْ عَبْدْ هَذِهِ مُهْلِكَةٌ. This is the end of me. This is going to take care of me, so to speak, And then the Prophet ﷺ, after he mentioned this problem, he says, فَمَنْ أَرَادَ أَنْ يُزَحْزَحَ عَنِ النَّارِ وَيُدْخَلَ الْجَنَّةِ. He should do the following. Anyone who wants to be saved out of hellfire and admitted into paradise, he has Allah to give it to all of us. He should do the following. Why did he mention that? Because this is basically what matters at the end. This is the big reality that in the middle of tribulations we forget that at the end what we want is to go to Al-Jannah and to be safe from hellfire. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet used the same expression that's in the Quran. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَمَنْ زُحْزِحَ عَنِ النَّارِ وَأُدْخِلَ الْجَنَّةِ فَقَدْ فَازَ. Anyone who is saved out of hell, who's, it says زُحْزِحَ is like barely being saved, barely making it out of hellfire, and admitted into paradise, then he won. And Allah left it like that, غير معرفة, like فقد فاز. What did he win? This is the ultimate win, the ultimate success, the open success. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala set that for us as the criterion for success. And the Prophet alayhi salatu wasallam repeated in that hadith. فَمَنْ أَرَادَ أَن يُزَحْزَحَ عَنِ النَّارِ وَيُدْخَلَ الْجَنَّةِ. And then he mentioned three things alayhi salatu wasallam. If you want to be successful, I say three things. First of all, I'll read them and I'll translate them. It is فَلْتَأْتِهِ مَنِيَّتُهُ وهو يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر وليأتي إلى الناس الذي يحب أن يؤتى إليه ومن بايع منكم إماما فأعطاه صفقة يده وثمرة فؤاده فليطعه إن استطاع. The first one he says فلتأته منيته وهو يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر. You should not die except believing in Allah and the last day. So this is the one thing that you don't want to leave without. No matter what happens, keep that in mind. Despite the tribulations, despite the difficulties, despite the hardship, despite بلاء وأشياء تنكرونها, don't leave without that. And this is going to be the strength. This is the source of your strength. By the way, this is what's keeping our brothers and sisters in Gaza perseverant. It's that criterion here. Allah says in the Quran, إن كنتم تعلمون فإنهم يعلمون كما تعلمون. That if you're going through pain, your enemies are also going through pain. But then comes the difference. In other words, when it comes to going through pain, you're the same thing. Everybody goes through pain. But then comes the difference. وَتَرْجُونَ مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَا يَرْجُونَ. But what you're seeking from Allah is something they are not seeking. And that's the difference. This is the connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's what's going to give you the edge. That's what's going to give you the edge. So here, the Prophet says, فَلْتَأْتِهِ مَنِيَّتُهُ وَهُوَ يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. Despite everything that is happening, you don't want to lose that. That's the one thing you don't want to lose. And then, وَلْيَأْتِ إِلَى النَّاسِ الَّذِي يُحِبُّ أَن يُؤْتَى إِلَيْهِ. He should treat people the way he likes them to treat him. This is the golden rule. And the Prophet mentioned it in more than one hadith. That you treat people not the way they're treating you, but the way you like them to treat you, which is a more objective criterion, so to speak. So look at the way they treat, that you like them to treat you, that's how you treat them back. That's how you treat them back. By your own principles, not by their own guidelines. So based on your own principles. وَلْيَأْتِ إِلَى النَّاسِ الَّذِي يُحِبُّ أَن يُؤْتَى إِلَيْهِ. Treat the people, all the people. All the people. Which is also another thing that sometimes is lost in times of tribulations. You lose your character, you lose your principles, you get angry, you get upset, you get frustrated. Well, you still want to keep your principles. You want to keep your character. وَلْيَأْتِ إِلَى النَّاسِ الَّذِي يُحِبُّ أَن يُؤْتَى إِلَيْهِ. And then he said that وَمَنْ بَايَعَ مِنْكُمْ إِمَامًا, if you have committed to an imam, you have to obey him as much as you can. So these are the so to speak the ways to safety in times of tribulation. The interesting thing is that when the Prophet ﷺ diagnosed the problem, mentioned the problem, he mentioned problems that happen at the level of the ummah. بلاء وأشياء تنكرونها يرافق بعضها بعضا, all of these things. But when he mentioned the solution, he mentioned something individual that each person can do, so as not to have an excuse for not doing anything. That even though it's big problems, but there's still something that you can do. At least you start with yourself. This is something that I cannot blame the enemies of Islam for. It's my own behavior, because I can give excuses and justifications for not doing what I'm supposed to do. But the enemies of Islam are not going to force me to treat people badly. They're not going to force me basically to leave or to abandon my religion, my belief. So this is something that at least the decision is in my own hands for these things. Even if it's not that easy, but at least the decision is in my own hands. So I don't have any excuse for not doing what I'm supposed to do. SubhanAllah, this hadith, again, gives each one of us a responsibility. Everyone has a role to play, especially in times like that. That in times of difficulties, I will not leave the path of Allah. More than anything else, I will hold on to it even more strong. And that's what the Prophet says in another hadith, where he says there will be basically divisions and differences. He says, عليكم بسنتي وسنة الخلفاء الراشدين المهديين من بعدي عضوا عليها بالنواجذ. He says, stick to my path and the path of my guided caliphs after me, guided Khalifa after me. And he says, bite on them with your molar teeth, not with the front teeth, lightly, but all the way back. In other words, hold on to them very, very strongly, because that's going to be the path of safety. In times of tribulations and hardship, that's going to be the way actually out. So that's why, subhanAllah, the fact that we have the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ in our hands, we don't have to restart everything from zero. We have that. We have the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the divine guidance from the Prophet ﷺ. That's why we stick to that and we try to read the positive in every situation. Despite everything. SubhanAllah, as dark as the things might happen, even with the elections that happen. SubhanAllah, I think one thing that now everybody actually is noticing is that people are taking the Muslim vote seriously. Because they know that the Muslim vote can make a difference, especially in a swing state like Michigan. SubhanAllah, to the point that after Trump's in his first term, he was attacking the Muslims. Now he's praising the Muslims. Good, wonderful. SubhanAllah, like I said, I'm not praising, I'm not saying, but at least it tells you something, that something good came out of it. SubhanAllah, something good, which means more work for us to be done. So to be able to read the positive, despite the darkness, despite the difficulties that are happening, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has his plan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has his plan. And then having hope, by the way, is part of what we call husn al-dhann billah, part of thinking the best of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is something that we were asked to do. That's what the Prophet ﷺ says, لا يموتن أحدكم إلا وهو يحسن الظن بربه. That one of you should not die except thinking the best of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And to trust that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring the change. سيجعل الله من بعد عسر يسرا. Sometimes in a way that you didn't expect. I think it's like that quoted the verse, وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. Sometimes, subhanAllah, the relief comes in a way that we didn't expect. And we have the hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He will give us more than we hope. And listen to some of the examples of the Quran. I mean, look, for example, in the story of Hajar, alayhi salam. All she was hoping, going back from Safa and Marwa, is to have some sustenance or something for her infant child, Ismail. Look what Allah gave her. He gave her the well of Zamzam flowing until the end of times. Musa alayhi salam, when he went, he says when he went, he saw the light going there, آتيكم منها بقبس وأجد على النار هدى. Now I mean, bring you something that will give you some more. What did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give him? The revelation. So that's why we have the hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He will give us actually hope. So that's why, we do whatever we can, but we never actually lose hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And even though it may sound like it's taking too long, it's very hard, but still, in the life of a person, it's too long. But in the life of a nation, it is not too long. It's a different time scale, different measuring stick when it comes to the nations. So some big changes are happening. And we hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the changes will be good. Any comment or questions on what I said?
A question on the individual. Said, although the tribulations come to the ummah, but the kind of the action the Prophet is seeking is an individual action. But at the same time, there's another hadith that, the time will come where somebody's holding on their iman even as an individual. It's not that easy. Yeah. So even that individualistic kind of action or reaction to the turbulence, sometimes you are hit with a also a wall, like another turbulence, which is you are not even satisfied with the level of obedience or iman that you have, and there's even an external influence or blocker to that. So how do you become steadfast regardless of that pushback from the community, society, all the filth that is being pushed at you and your children, and still being able to survive it?
MashaAllah, you mentioned so much. It's really good. It's all important, Let me see, where do I start? Well, first of all, by the way, the hadith did mention in a way that the individual obligations, but there is actually an indication to a collective one. That's what he said at the end, so there is basically the notion or the component of the collective work actually SubhanAllah, interestingly, when we look at what's happening today and we start basically, our iman will start getting shaky. Interestingly, that the people that are in the middle of the hardship, they have a strong iman. They do not question the way we do. And I can tell you, by the way, from experience that I grew up during the war in Lebanon. So I'm not talking from behind the desk, we lived through that. And I can tell you that people in general, their belief in times of difficulties is stronger than it is in times of peace. That during the difficulties that were happening in there, people had a closer adherence to Islam than they did after the war actually was over. So subhanAllah, the difficulties sometimes bring people actually closer together. But when we're watching ourselves from there, it's probably affecting us, not as far as pain is concerned, affecting us as far as questioning our faith more than it is affecting them. More than it is affecting them. I think the important thing is to remember in times like these that we need to go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more than any other time. Even sometimes forcing ourselves to do that. And sometimes the difficulty actually will take care of that, unfortunately. Sometimes people actually need the difficulty to wake them up. Sometimes people have it the easy way, but sometimes it is that difficulty that actually need you to reevaluate everything, to re-examine everything with a different perspective, and to see things differently. I can tell you, that subhanAllah, the events have uncovered so many things that are happening, uncovered so many, people, exposing different people that we used to think they're, mashallah, righteous and leaders, and they became followers of this tyrant or this dictator and all of that. This is what's happening. SubhanAllah, it exposed people's realities. This is one of the things, that happens in times of difficulties. Another thing is that anyway, it purifies your heart and shows you your own reality to yourself. I mean, I can tell you, for example, I used to think there was certain things that happened to me. I used to think, gosh, I have a good belief, I have a strong faith, nothing, and then a problem happens. And everything became shaky. I started questioning everything. I started doubting myself. What happened to my belief? I thought I was stronger than that. SubhanAllah. Allah knows my reality, but I need to know about it myself so I can do something about it. I don't want to find out that my faith is weak on the day of judgment and be too late. I want to find out actually in here. So the fact that these things are happening to me, anyway, it shows me my own reality. It purifies the lines so I can do something about it and not being too busy with certain things that basically distract me away from that which is important. So sometimes the difficulties does that to us. How do you, the other, mashallah, like I said, you mentioned so many things, like the principle of holding on to the...
So I love the fact that you said difficulty sometimes actually gives you the ability to see through some of the petty things and just focus on your belief, and that yes, sometimes some of the miniature fears that you have around us here, that are in scale of what people in Gaza are seeing is nothing. And I think that helps us to see through like some of these inconveniences that we have in our life.
Subhanallah, you know, when people live in a privileged environment, their worries will not be as significant, so to speak, as people that live in a more difficult environment. You know, I'm not saying, you know, I'm not dismissing, by the way, people's pain, people's worries, people's, you know, difficulties, you know, any of it, of course. It's all significant if people actually are feeling. But sometimes when you measure what some of the others are going through, yeah, you see it different. You know, I mean, look at people are losing everything, and people of their family members. When I still complain about not having the latest iPhone, I mean, I'm exaggerating. Well, maybe not exaggerating too much, you know. But see, the point is that things would fall into the proper perspective in that situation. And difficulties does that to us. To see actually what really matters. Yes.
So commenting on the same question, the same direction. Now, when we are living in a time of ease, and alhamdulillah, everything provided and everything, yes, we can see the people who are suffering and we say, Allah, you know, may Allah help, and we try to help as much as we can. But what are good tips for us to keep reminding ourselves to stay, to steadfast, or to even get ourselves to be more, I mean, benefit to ourselves at the end, regarding our faith, regarding our practices. What are good tips that we can do to just benefit from this ease time that we live in, and don't lose it, don't just really indulge in our life?
Well, if you have a good tip, you let me know. La wallah, subhanAllah, this is something wallahi that we all struggle with. You know, especially when we see certain things that are happening in there. First of all, I think the rule is that to be grateful in times of peace, you know, and to be patient in times of difficulties. So basically, to be grateful to what we have and to recognize the blessings of Allah, which we have taken for granted. You know, so when you see what's happening, alhamdulillah that what I have, alhamdulillah for what I have, you know, and to be grateful and to share some of that. And to stop complaining, basically, you know, like I stop whining about things and all of that, but to be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the things that we have. And to share if we can, to share actually some of these things that we can. And I would say that sometimes you have to turn off the TV. And not to say that we don't care. Of course, you know, we care. And I think that's why sometimes it gets to our heart. Not to ignore it and to pretend that it does not exist. But sometimes you can only take that much, so much. It's too much sometimes to hear. You know, yeah, subhanAllah, if you leave it to me, I would be, like probably all of you, I would be glued to the TV, you know, to the news channel, you know, days and nights, hoping that something would happen, and at the end my head would be like this. You know, that sometimes I still have to balance basically my day, and not to be overexposed to everything that is happening. You know, the same thing, by the way, when we talk about, even in times, by the way, of, let's say, Islamophobia and everything here in this country, I don't have to be exposed to every single instance of homophobia that's happening. You know? If I have something positive to change, to share with the others, I would do it. But sometimes I have to keep a little bit of a distance. I'm sorry, just give me a second. A little bit of a distance, not because I don't care, but because if I get discouraged too much, I won't be able to do anything. I won't be able to help. I won't be able to do anything. It just paralyzes me. Yes.
Okay. The way I would relate to this, to follow up to Tariq and what my dear sister
You're
said,
gonna help me out.
it's actually the purification cycle that we're going through. You know, if you look at the blacksmith and when they hit the iron to make the sword, every time people say, "Is this guy crazy?" He's putting it in you know, really high temperature and then taking it out and then hitting it to purify the, you know, the particles and these weak particles. And this is part of what we're going through as Muslims, you know.
This is what Allah says after the battle of Uhud.
Exactly.
That's so as to purify your minds, basically, and then expose your realities to you.
Right.
This is the way it happens. So you start seeing things. Like I said, it exposed people. Well, many people were exposed, and I'm not talking about people's personal sins, brother. I'm talking about people that are kissing up to dictators and leaders, and this is worse. This is far worse. When somebody that we people used to look up to, suddenly that person has sold his deen, has sold everything to please this person or that person. Subhanallah, this is, and I think you said that, Ya Allah, keep us steadfast. I don't want that to happen to me. You fear on yourself when these things actually are happening. Sometimes someone says something, somebody wants to say something.
No, but I want to add,
Yes,
of course,
yes.
go back to the basic. Quran, يعني subhanallah, everything we're going through, it's there. Subhanallah.
It is there,
Not just memorizing Quran, understand, tadabbur, tafakkur in the Quran, to learn the Quran. And it's,
not to,
it's,
as a book of blessing. No, it is not a book of blessing. It is a book of blessing, but it is not meant to be a book of
no,
blessing.
it's,
It is a book of guidance.
tadabbur, it's
Yes.
hayat.
Yes.
Yeah.
Approaching basically that, subhanallah, when Sayyid Qutb was talking about the greatness of the Sahaba, as to what made them as great, the secret of their greatness, he mentioned 3 things. One of them, he says, is that their approach to the Quran was that of a book of instructions, not a book of education. So not just something that gives education in a way, something that you study academically that gives you this intellectual, satisfaction, but more of a book of instructions. Allah is talking to me, He's telling me to do something. I want to know what Allah wants me to do so I can do it.
Yeah, we were having discussions also about Gaza and everything, and people are feeling, very helpless that they cannot do anything. And we had a long discussion, and we came up with the idea that so Gaza is a tribulation for them out there. They're carrying the brunt of it. But we all have our own Gaza. You have your own tribulation, and you have to seek and not give in, and find what is called wajib al-waqt and al-qudra al-istita'a, what you can do, and make sure you do it instead of being consumed. It's very good من لم يهتم بأمر المسلمين فليس منهم. If you're not worried about them, you're not part of the Muslim Ummah. But again, like you said, it's not overconsumption in pity and grief that you just stick to the ground and you leave whatever you can do. You already can do a lot here, and you'll be asked about what you can do over here, not what you couldn't do over there.
I think both, and I think again, they're not mutually exclusive. I think you have to be able to balance actually both. To do whatever you can do actually there, but of course, your priority is your immediate obligations. That's what you do. But again, this is not to say that I forget the other. But subhanAllah, sometimes, like I said, it's too much. You feel guilty about enjoying anything. This is holiness. This is, inshallah, coming out of a good heart, out of a good place, that you want to make sure it does not reach the point of paralyzing, which you could. SubhanAllah. Any other suggestion or question?
Like when you said Salah ad-Din and asking for Salah ad-Din, I saw another comment the other day. Somebody said people have been asking Allah for Salah ad-Din and referencing the person, Allah gave him Salah ad-Din and then they abandoned him. It's like, it's true. And Salah ad-Din didn't succeed because he was Salah ad-Din. He succeeded because of the army he had, the people supporting him, people going after him.
It's a generation.
It's a generation. It supports the support system around him.
Yes.
And I think even Salah ad-Din Nusrati, as you said, where's that support? Where's that kind of momentum? So I think it's part of that, creating that momentum, creating that.
We have this complex of Satan that we think everything goes back to one person. We want Isa to come back. We want al-Mahdi to come back. We want, Salah ad-Din. We want this, In other words, just wait to happen by itself. Like somebody once said that the problems of the Ummah today are the results of the previous generation, or were caused by the previous generation, and will be resolved by the next generation. In other words, I'll just sit and wait for it to happen. But of course, even the next generation will be just like mine, unless I prepare it to do something differently. So that's why, it just builds up.
And also like times الواحدين, a lot of خونة and they betrayed الواحد. يعني we have to know reality of our history and subhanallah to understand what we're going through.
But the point here is that it was not just one person.
One person,
Even
it's a
before
lot,
that,
it's- yeah.
when Nuruddin Zinki was
No,
assassinated
Imad
and
Nuruddin,
was assassinated,
Bayoun,
it was not
yeah.
the end.
Yeah.
That's when somebody else was present, because it was not just one person, but it was a whole
Oh,
generation.
generation.
Even before that, like prior to like the army that he led into,
When did the Salajika, the soldiers,
Yeah.
and all of
there
that?
was one army that went up like specifically prized one of the men at the time. It wasn't even like the grand like the masses. It's just like they're like we got to do something. Like and they failed to look they went.
So, but the point here is that it's never one person. It is never one person. Any other question or comments? I'm sorry about it. I've fed for you, Julia.
It's okay.
Some of the fuses are off already.
You can survive. You can have us pay.
Any other comment or question?
We had like onlookers waiting for that person to come along, or in some instances they're waiting for the right message to get their executive director lined up, or they're waiting for the right organization to be stable before they commit to it. Until then, there's this sense of like I'll wait, or maybe I'll do something even, but I'll just do my own thing on the side. Like there's nothing that appeals to me in terms of building something that's more sustainable. Because like when somebody works on something, somebody works on something and they get hit by a bus, and there's nobody else to continue that thread. Like it's not something that will lead into that next generation.
Well, it goes back, I think, to what we discussed in the previous session, I think, and the session earlier today, is that some people basically expect perfection without working for it. They expect things to be perfect in order for them to get involved, without contributing actually toward that perfection or that which they're expecting. Yeah, as if like, okay, you do the work, once you're done, once everything's perfect, then I'll come and help you out. Well, I mean, why don't I actually help you out to get there, instead of actually basically waiting for that to happen and continuously criticizing you for not being there. I think this should be the approach, but not restarting everything from zero. Okay, well, this organization that you're working with is not good, I'm gonna start another one. And then after that, of course, that's gonna end up just like this one. Because when yours started, it was great. And then somebody else will do the same thing. And we'll keep on restarting from square one with every generation. And we will never actually accumulate. The cumulative effort will never start. But we have to actually keep building up. That's why they said that the Islamic work is tasallum wa taslim. You receive it from those before you, and you pass it on to those after. You don't restart everything from zero, because this cumulativeness, will never actually start if we keep thinking this way. Even though it may be more challenging, like what we said, somebody, I forgot who said it, that if you want to move fast, you move alone. If you want to move far, you move together. And if you want to move far, then it has to be basically in a group, even if it means you move more slowly. And it will take you much further than moving by yourself, moving fast and then stopping. Yes.
It's more of a reflection, kind of applying it. I watched this movie the other day, and there's two basically main characters. There's one guy we can call him the main character, and the other guy basically his friend. And they lawyers. But the main character is like trying to fix stuff after the war, and he's like going into public service. He goes to recruit his friend, and his friend is like, "No, I'm done. I finished. I did my part." And he's like, "Oh, just wait for everything else to get fixed on its own." But the main character realizes that no, it's not going to fix itself. I need to take charge, and he like goes and starts working and fixing, even though like while he's working, you see his friend in the back and it's like, "Oh, you're just gonna fail," or "Oh, it doesn't really matter. Someone else can do it," or even pointing out when he's wrong. But he was still taking, like the main character was still taking that action, and ended up benefiting everyone.
Well, I think this is it. Some people may choose to be like the first, some people will choose like the second. You know, this is the way it is, you know. The people, of course, that take things into their own hands in a way that try to change things, you know, these are the ones that will have the lasting impact. But some people will be content with the minimum. I mean, look at the masjid, for example. How many thousand people actually come for Jumu'ah? And then after that, they disappear into their own lives. That's it. They come for Jumu'ah and disappear into their own lives. You know, in other words, this is the masses of the Muslims. But you always have a group of people, you know, that will take it upon themselves to carry the message and ensures that actually it continues. And it becomes, in a way, the focus of their lives. You know, these are the ones. This is the hope of the ummah, not the masses that come and disappear. I'm not saying that these people are evil people, you know, but these are just the masses. You know, like even among the Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ, there were some people, like for example, one person that came to the Prophet, "Ya Rasulullah, if I pray 5 times a day, if I fast Ramadan, if I pay zakat, if I do Hajj, if I can, will I go to Al-Jannah?" And the Prophet said yes. And he says, "Wallahi, I will not add anything to that." Who was that person? Nobody knows him. Nobody heard of him. What is his name? What was his name? But everybody knows Abu Bakr. Everybody knows Aisha. Everybody knows Umar. Everybody knows these people. These are the people that actually really matter. You know? So not all of the people are the same. Now, and again, you cannot impose your own choice on the others, because some people, they don't want that. That's it. They don't want that. Well, that's fine. You don't want it. At least don't discourage me, like what that friend was doing. You're gonna fail. You're gonna die. So, you know, if you cannot do something good to support me, then don't discourage me. So that's why it's our choice, you know, to be of the first category or of the second category. To basically to think, that's it. I'm praying 5 times a day. I did my job. I don't want anything else. Or some people that will say, "No, I want to pray a bigger. I want to do something bigger." And it's these people, by the way, that kept the message for us today. Here in Santa Clara, 1450 years after the Prophet ﷺ, in California, in the US, we're still studying the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ. That's because of those few people. That's all.
You mentioned earlier about the concept of moving the knowledge, like just to know, it is not the goal, it's to change this knowledge to a practice it.
Yes.
But you did not comment on, or you did not continue on some ways to do that. Or I missed it, I don't know.
Well, the way is a mujahid. This is it. You know, so in a way, let's say, for example, I learned that, let's say, I have to have control of the things that I say. I say bad things, I'm vulgar, and all of these things. I have to control that. You know, I know that this is wrong. I learned that. Then after that comes the training, and in that training, you know, in other words, the training to stop that. Along that, you know, sometimes I would trip, I would relapse, I would do that, but I would continue. But the process is that of a struggle. So learning, for example, about generosity, learning about patience. I learned about that. That's the beginning. That's knowledge. But then after, how to get it is by practicing it and doing that mujahada, the self-struggle to do that. And it doesn't mean that I will change suddenly from one place to the other, you know, from one extreme to the other. It's a small, you know, partial changes that accumulate, you know, because if you're gonna basically set a big goal, you're setting yourself up for failure. You know, this is it. My goal is to memorize the whole Quran in 1 month. mashallah, it's really a great goal. But can you do it? You know, because if you set a goal like that, basically you're setting up yourself, you know, for failure from the beginning. So that's why you start, you know, you struggle with that until gradually you achieve some of these things. So it is that of a struggle. That's the process of tarbiyah, the process of change. Now there are certain factors that would help with that process. And among these factors, first of all, the dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't want to forget that. The other thing is, and it was mentioned earlier, the company, the people that you surround yourself with. The other thing is that if you want a change, you know, you pursue the path that would lead to change. You know, see, everything is a cause and effect. If I want certain effects, I have to pursue the required causes. I cannot live myself exactly the same way and expect things to go differently. This is the definition of insanity, by the way. Repeating the same action and expecting different results. So if I want something, let's say in that pursuit, in that mujahada, whatever it is that I'm actually pursuing, if I want to achieve a certain goal, I have to take the path that catalyzes that goal. I have to do basically the path that would lead to that happening. Not wallahi living the same thing and then by sheer will, I will change. It's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. It's cause and effect. If I know, for example, every time I go with this group of friends, we're gonna end up in the hookah shop, for example. What? Let's say hookah shop. If I let's say if I know that every time, for example, I hang out with these friends, I would end up in a hookah shop. Then the solution is to change that circle of friends, because I know that every time we get together, we end up in that place. So I cannot say, well, next time I'll resist, and it doesn't work. Okay, next time I will definitely resist. You know, so that's why it's a cause and effect. There are certain things that will basically help basically bring about that change. So again, I would say, you know, the dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, taking the required path, setting realistic goals, by the way, not being too ambitious, which sounds a little negative, you know, but anyway, setting goals that can be achieved. And along the path, by the way, two things to keep in mind, and I think it was brought up earlier, is that a partial achievement is an achievement. A partial change is still a change. It is not either 100% or zero. So if I had my goal, for example, to change, let's say my goal is to read the whole Quran during the month of Ramadan. And if I end up reading, let's say, 1/2 or 1/4 of the Quran, it doesn't mean I failed. No, I read 1/4 of the Quran. You know? So a partial change, a partial achievement is an achievement. The other thing is that a relapse does not mean failure. If along the path of that change, I relapsed for whatever reason, it doesn't mean I failed. It means I have to readjust my approach and see what went wrong and try to avoid it next time. So that's why it's a process. Tarbiyah and growth doesn't happen this way. It doesn't. It happens this way. You know, you trip, you correct, you adjust. That's how you do it. Sabbidu wa qaribu. فاتقوا الله ما استطعتم.
Keep trying.
Yeah. Give me the question.
So Imad was saying earlier with regards to like the position where some person is, you know, pushing themselves to be involved in that imperfect scenario, but then they have their, you know, the person who's comfortable on the sidelines doing the middle. I think that there are like I think that happens. It's not. It won't happen infrequently. People who are engaged actively in, you know, the great work trademark, like, but to the same effect of what you were saying earlier about, you know, going fast or going far. There's something to be said about people who might have this grind set per se that they do want to remain involved, but translating that or communicating that in a way that encourages their peers to also be a part of that collective, right? Even if they're not going to go at the same speed, you know, at least there's they can be somebody you go some distance with. It's a difficult. There's a communication barrier there to the point where somebody who is driven will decide this is a little too much trouble, and I don't really have like the bandwidth or the skill set to have this conversation right now. So I am going to go it alone right now, and maybe when I have something that's rolling, I can pull them in. Like
It sounds good on paper, but in reality, it doesn't work that way.
exactly. So what are the, I guess, for folks who do are they're going home tonight and they're full of fire, like how do they get their tomorrow move along?
Well, I think that there's a lot that can be done more than we realize, and it doesn't have to be something in the core of the work, but it can still be. Give me an example. There were some problems in one of the chapters where basically everything has fell apart. But what? Everything basically the chapter was almost like absent, But somebody actually in there kept on leading halaqats and Muslims with the same mentality. So in other words, what he's doing on his own, because that's really what's present, is not something far from what he's supposed to do. But that's what's there. So he kept on doing it in the name of that jama'ah, in the name of that jama'ah, connecting to that jama'ah. So when things basically were properly conducted, then immediately it was connected back to them. So anyway, sometimes stepping out, but not stepping out completely, but remaining connected. Remaining connected because, again, in our jama'ah, our commitment is not to individuals, it's to the principles. And you know what the principles are. The principles are these. So even with the presence or not, I will still work with the same direction. But I think you will always find, I think within that chapter, within that, people that are really honest and sincere and are willing to work actually with you. And they're not gonna actually basically oppose you. There always some, alhamdulillah, there's a lot of khayr, wallahi, in this region. There's a lot of khayr, people that will really actually be happy to support you any way that they could. So it's not, I think there's more reason to see the cup as half full or than half empty.
One thing just to add, you were saying about motivation and stuff like that, and sometimes I lose energy or something, and we tend to fall into this I'm sitting on the sideline, I'm starting to criticize people who are working. They're not perfect, they don't have the right style, they're doing it the wrong way, they don't understand this generation, this land, whatever. One thing I really, first of all, like I said, sometimes I go and check myself, okay, at least they're doing something, okay, they're putting in the effort. He's putting 40 hours, 30 hours, or even 10 hours. I'm putting nothing. And another thing I tell myself, فَالْتَقُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لِتَصْمُتْ. You would either say something positive, khair, or just don't have negativity and start demolishing the work that they're doing. Instead, you should be motivating them and try to find the energy. And this is difficult, to find the energy to motivate the workers, because sometimes I motivate him and he will do stuff far greater than I would have ever done it, and I'll still share the ajr because I motivated him and he started doing stuff. So sometimes it's good to remind ourselves that motivation and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam Quran حرض المؤمنين. It's even a higher level of motivation.
Exactly. But motivation does not mean continuously giving advice, like we said.
No, of course not.
I'm not saying
You
that's
can
what
do better.
said.
You can
exactly. That sometimes people think that I have to keep on correcting. I have to keep on pointing to the shortcomings. I have to keep, and it becomes too much. It becomes too much. Any other question or comments?
Ahmed.
Comments? So
That's not that so like it's very helpful.
طيب جزاك الله خير. It's back to Mrs. Bayda. جزاكم الله خير.
جزاك الله خير. جزاك الله خير. We had a long day today.
Yeah.
So جزاك الله خير. We
Awesome.
appreciate you being with us.